This is Van Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air with Mary Snyder. You're a storytelling swashbuckler and strategist, speaker, and coach. And I want to welcome you to the Van Electric Ghost podcast. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's great to talk to new people like almost every day of the week. And we're going to have a great conversation about your story and all the things that you do. I always ask a couple questions of every guest before we get deep into it.
Let's
Uh,
do it.
what, what motivates you, and why do you do what you do?
Well, I'm a natural born storyteller. I was born two storytellers, and I love helping people tell their story because most people don't know how to tell it, but everyone has an incredible story. It just gets lost in all the data and the details.
It's kind of like the elevator pitch because I
Yep.
have multiple careers. In part of my career, I'm a software designer called a business system analyst,
Uh-huh.
and we have like ideas like user stories, right? And
Yes.
we have to develop the story to build the UI, the user information experience, and the system and all that. So we have different audiences. I have like the
Right.
C-suite. You have the developers, you have the customers, you have the actuary, you have all these different audiences. You have to know how to talk to each one of them. And
I,
it's like
not,
over the years, you've developed like, okay, well, if I'm talking to the C-suite, I do this. If I talk to
yep.
this part of the customer, then I do that. And
Absolutely.
so is that
I
part of what you
always
get into?
Absolutely. I always say you have to tell the right story to the right people at the right time. Because if you're talking to somebody in a C suite and you're bringing a product to them, that's a different story than you would talk to somebody that is a frontline manager. They're going to want to do different things about that product. And the story that I tell as a speaker on a stage is very different than the story I tell as someone who's trying to raise money because I work with a lot of nonprofits.
Mm.
And you have to help them tell the story that will inspire hearts and open wallets. And that's the key is the stories are all there. It's we have to cut away all the, for lack of a better word, crap
Mhm.
and get to the meat of the story and tell it well.
It's like the noise. It's like when we're a musician, like you go sitting there with a band and they're playing for an hour and you guys say, "Where's the hook?"
That's
Right?
ex
Like that's
where's the and that's the opening line. When you step on a stage, or you sit down across from someone and you want them to listen to you have to capture their attention in the first 7 seconds. That's the industry is telling us we have a 7-second attention span. It used to be about 15.
yeah, it's
Um,
bad.
and I think it's actually short. I'm gonna be honest with you. I think
I
it's
think it's like
shorter than 7.
3 seconds.
I think it's like 3. So if I step onto a stage and I start saying, "Oh, it's so great to be here and thank you for
Yeah,
having me," and
you're
"Isn't the weather?" Everyone is tuned out because in their hand they hold a myriad of entertainment. And if you do that, they've checked out. So you have to hook them. You have to grab them literally by the throat, captivate them, and then you have them. But you have to tell the story well, even
mhm.
after you captured them. But you got to capture them first.
Well, it's like when I talk to a lot of authors in this
Mm,
age where, you
yes.
got the 9 second, 30 second, the thing
Yes.
with authors is they're still able to get people to go into something that's going to take hours.
Yes.
And I always find that fascinating because musicians, we've kind of run into the problem where, we used to be album oriented. Now we're just
Yes.
playlist single oriented. But a lot of us still yearn for the album and we
Oh,
still
yeah.
write in terms of like albums.
Yes.
But the customers or the audience aren't really into that. We have to kind of
Mm-mm.
force them into it, and,
Yes.
it's not ideal, and so I always enjoy talking to authors because they're able to hook people and get them to stay into something for hours, if not days.
Yes, and I love you said albums because I mean, I grew up with albums like vinyl. So I'm really showing my age, but
Yeah.
I loved album covers and album liners. I just don't think that the people today know what they're missing
Mhm.
because the cover art on,
It's just
I'm a child
amazing.
of the '80s, it was amazing.
Even like I'm a child of the '70s, like Led
Oh,
Zeppelin
yeah.
covers. They had these cutouts and these thing
Yes.
pinwheels,
Yes.
and as
Yes.
as a child of the '70s, I remember my brother having some of the Zeppelin albums,
Oh,
and I'm like,
yeah.
"Wow, that's so cool. That's so cool."
So cool. I still have a few of my albums. I still have Styx Pieces of 8. I have, Fleetwood Mac. I have several Fleetwood Mac albums, but I
Like
kept those.
Rumors.
Oh, didn't everyone? Everyone
Yeah,
had
Rumors.
Rumors.
Everybody
Uh,
has that.
I have Toys in the Attic, from
That's a good record.
that's an album that's an amazing. But I love what you said about albums because as storytellers, we have to cut a single. We don't get to do a whole album. So what we have to do is when I work with someone on their story, they bring the album and we
Mhm.
pull the single out
You get the
and
single out
everything
of it.
left. Yep, and everything left on the cutting room floor is other singles because
Mhm.
most people put if we're thinking in the way of a songwriter, they put all their songs in one story. So they'll
Yeah,
have 4 or 5 different songs, 4 or 5 different stories. And, I think about a singer-songwriter, and the beauty of that is they're telling one often it's one captured story, and
yeah,
it's such a beautiful thing. Same thing with storytelling. You're telling one story about one person that overcame or lived through one thing, and what is the end result of that? And
yeah, it's like a Springsteen. Like, I love, Bruce Springsteen and Dylan and Neil
yes,
Young, and they,
yes,
I'm a child of the '70s again. It's like I love
yes.
those, starting with Dylan, but
Oh,
then, going to, like,
so
Neil and then getting into Bruce, is
yep.
that the fact that they could, if you saw their concerts, people would it's just intoxicated, get drawn in, and
Oh,
they were drawn into these 3-hour, 4-hour concerts.
it's incredible. It's
They
incredible.
and, in an age today where people are not as drawn in, um,
Mm-mm.
that the idea that you could tell stories and there'll be multiple stories, like,
Yes.
in these albums,
Oh,
and
yeah.
like, which one is, like, yeah, it's just like, you can't choose it, like, Dylan, like,
Mm-mm.
Tangled Up in Blue. That just tells such a, like,
Oh,
epic
it's such a great
story.
story.
He just has these
Such a
epic
great story.
stories, like, even, like, Idiot Wind is, like, there's this
Mhm.
epic story, and then you're
And
like, I get drawn
you
in.
yes, and that's the whole thing with storytelling is you're drawing them in. And one of the things I always encourage my people to do, because the people I work with are oftentimes inspiring people. It's an encouraging or an inspirational message, or they're raising money. So you need to inspire people to open their wallet. So it's all inspiration. But I always ask this question: what do you want the person sitting there to feel? What do you want them to know? And then what do you want them to do?
Mhm.
Because unlike
Call to
music,
action.
music just lives, I mean, it's a part of who we are. It doesn't ask us to do anything, but a message from a stage, a story from a stage, it often has a call to action. And if it doesn't, the audience doesn't know what to do with what you just told them. They're
Yeah,
like,
you need that call to action because it's like, if you just make a statement and you don't direct people where to go, then
they
they're like,
don't know.
"Okay, you made a statement, but what am I supposed to do
What
with
do I
it?"
do now? I was working with one of my clients, and it was before I started working with him. I happened to be at this big event where he was speaking, and it was a beautiful speech, lots of great emotion, and, the audience was drawn in. It was all about children and the lack of clean water around the world, and I learned so much about there's very little clean water in this world, most of the
Yeah,
water, and so many people die every year because of lack of drinking water, and you're thinking, "Seriously? When it
it's a
can be
water
solved."
planet. We have a
Yes,
water planet and there's no
we
water.
have a and the water's bad. This can be solved with a $50 filter, and will give people water clean water for 10 years. So he's telling this passionate story, and we're all in it, and then he just kind of stops, and you could feel the energy in the room was like, "Well, what do you want us to do?" But by then he had gone on to another story and left us standing there.
And on that one, they
It's
didn't, like, give you, like, "Okay, well, you can help support
this is yeah, for
people and
$50.
go in here and putting it up on the
Absolutely.
board and maybe giving the
Yes.
link or."
Yes,
handing out
but something.
flyers or
We worked together the next year, and we did land the plane the next year, you'll be happy to know, with a very simple for $50, you can provide a family with clean water for that will last for 10 years. One $50 donation for $500, and we raised more money than they'd ever raised because he told people what to do. And
yeah,
that's the thing with storytelling. And it may be something as simple as inspiration. I think about a more inspirational speaker, and they say, "You know, I want you to walk out of here, and for the next 5 days, I want you to wake up, look in the mirror, and say, 'You know what? I've got this. I'm made for this. I can do this.'" You've given them something to do with the message they just got from you.
yeah, it's that inspirational, like, you want people to be inspired, but then you wanna direct them toward, the thing that you actually think is gonna help
Right.
them get to that goal. And if you don't, you don't
You don't know what to
actually
do.
finish it, you don't finish that the whole statement. If you never give
Yes.
them the rest of it, then they don't know what to do with it. It's
It's
interesting, that's like finding the stories to tell, and then
mm,
also understand, like, why do, like, the idea, like, leaders.
yeah.
Like, I've been working with I've worked in business, I've worked with companies like Fortune 1000,
Mhm.
in the Fortune 500, Fortune 1000,
Right?
but you go to the company meeting, you know, and the executives are there and they're telling their story and everybody's falling asleep because they're
Mhm.
and these are the employees, like, because we're supposed to be keyed up, but we're like, okay, well, they're
Yes.
saying the same thing they always say. They didn't really say
Right, right,
anything that
right,
really
right, right,
gets
right.
me. Yeah, it's like you just totally tune out. And they're just, okay, yeah, everybody had to go there, but when we didn't buy anything they were saying.
Mm-mm,
Eh,
mm-mm.
so how do you get those leaders to understand? It's like, well, you forced everybody to show up,
Yeah.
but you can't force them to actually, deal with it
You
because
can't force
you
them to
didn't.
deal with it. But here's what I see when I work with leaders, when I work with a C-suite leader who needs to deliver um, a message that is hard. And sometimes they are just hard. Sometimes you're having to walk in there and say something that's difficult. Well, first of all, they're going to match your energy. Your audience will match your energy. So you have to be authentic. If you're getting ready to announce that you're doing a layoff,
Yeah,
boy,
it's
you
like,
better be real authentic and you better be very honest and lay out all the details. Don't leave anything up for like chance. Like we'll figure out what we're going to do next. No, we're going to do A, B, C, and D. And here are the dates for that. Here's date 1, date 2,
mm,
date 3, and date 4. And you lay it out. And if you're coming in and you've got some great news, do not deliver it like this. So here's the great news. Emotion, when
mhm,
we are emotional with our audience, when we are excited, when we are having a great time, when we are really going, and this is what I'm gonna ask people to pay attention to right now. Pay attention to what you're thinking right now. So I'm talking like this, and I'm saying, "This is gonna be so exciting, and I am so thrilled to tell you."
yeah,
Your heart is starting to increase. You're matching my energy. It's the neuroscience behind this. We have learned that the way our audience listens has a lot to do with the way we deliver.
yeah. It's like actors. If
I
you're an actor and you're on the stage, like you're doing a
Yes,
play, and I like
yes,
dealing with like musicians, like we have stage personas. Because
yes,
we like I can't just go off like at the breakfast table phantom isn't the phantom that's on stage in New York. If I go play in
exactly.
a club in New York, I'm gonna bring some excitement. I'm gonna actually be like a two-way street, reading the
Yeah,
room, reading the
yes,
band,
yep,
reading the environment, and making adjustments. So if
e
something's not hitting, then we're gonna adjust it. If something is hitting, we're gonna go into it. And it's like
exactly.
having that ability to like, okay, I have this plan of what I'm gonna do, but I'm not totally tied to the plan if I see it isn't working.
I love that.
Once you
Phantom,
prove.
that is so key. It's read the room. That is and you're a musician, so you're a natural performer. Not natural, that is probably natural along with a
Taught.
lot of
Practice.
hours. I don't wanna minimize the work you've put in, because people tell me all the time, "But it's so easy for you." I was like, "Well, that's called about 25 years of doing it. That's what that's called. That's why
Yeah.
it looks
At
easy
10,000
now.
hours.
I got my
10,000 hours.
10,000. I got my 10,000. So one of the things I teach speakers, particularly those leaders, because this is not natural for them. They're used to being the person everyone's looking to, and they are delivery. Well, you have to read your room. I was with a group, and they were delivering some information that they thought would be, oh, this is not going to be a big deal. It was an announcement of a person that was leaving. He was one of the C-suite executives on the executive team. He was leaving and going on to work for a big nonprofit. And so this director announced it, and he said, he's been working there for the past year. I'm telling you, and they were in a virtual setting, Phantom. That chat blew up. People are like, well, that's what he's been doing. I mean, we're over here trying our best to hold this thing together. They had been in a tough season. They were coming out of COVID, and they had been through a couple of rounds of layoffs. That the look in his eyes, and I was coaching him, and I was like, you need to be careful with this. This is, oh, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I'm like, I don't think you're reading your audience well. That chat blew up. People were furious because he didn't pay attention to the fact he just said the guy that was leading this whole department was also working for this other group. I mean, it was, in other words, read the room, people, read the room. Know your audience, know your audience and what they think as
Very
best you
important.
can.
Yeah, I
Um,
think you have to do the work, right? You have to
yeah,
like, I mean, you think like a leader is gonna do the work, they got people help them do the work, but it
you
could
would
be that
think.
they are maybe not listening. Like, what I've learned, like like when you're like, you can have a lot of ideas, right? You can be
Yes.
with your band, you could be with the producer, and then somebody tells you something that they go like, "Oh, they just red marked my idea." And
Yeah.
then you take it personal and you don't like learn to grow. Like the first
Right.
thing when you learn as a musician is like there's all these people around it, like, oh, sometimes I'm gonna have to adjust. I can't just take what I did. And I
Mhm.
might think it's the greatest thing in the world, but I have to actually put it out in the world and then it gets feedback.
Yes.
Authors do
Yes.
that with the beta readers, and you really need to kind of walk that through. But if you have a top down and everybody's scared to challenge you
Oh,
because of your
that's so
position and
good.
you've set up that environment,
Yep.
and you're not gonna even get advice because, like, the way you handle advice is you just yell or you
Yep.
knock
Dismiss.
people down,
Yep. Yep.
miss, and then you're never gonna get the right feel
So
'cause
good. Well, and as a musician, I would love to hear from you. So, as a musician, you're walking into a new space to perform. How do you read the room there? Because I know as a speaker, sometimes I'm walking in and I'll be in front of a few hundred people, or it might be a few thousand. And sometimes I don't know the room that well. So, how do you read the room?
well, part of it is like a vibe, and we're kinda like,
Hmm.
metaphysical kind of feel, but also, like, you get the sound check. So in your sound check, part of like the secret sauce to some musicians, like in your sound check, you actually don't just do scales, you actually do something to see if
Okay.
what the people actually in the room deal with.
Okay.
Like if they vibe to something and you just throw it out there and you're like, okay,
Right.
they're
Okay.
actually they're into it. So you can kind of pre-fill the room with your energy.
I
You
love
can
that.
kind of
I love that.
so if you do that, then you get initial feedback. So, okay, well, this is gonna work, right? I know what to do. It's like if we hit it with this kind of energy, they're
Yep.
gonna respond. And so,
Yep.
it's kind of different vibe. Like if you're in Tokyo, the
Yep.
audiences there tend to be so polite that you can't even read them
Really?
after the performance. Like you could
Oh,
be in the middle of the performance and they won't clap, they won't make any noise until you get to the end. And so
oh
you're
my
sitting there and you're
goodness.
like, "Oh, I don't know how these people are reading it, but they love it." And at the end, they like but a lot of musicians, we deal with like immediate feedback. And if we don't
Yeah.
feel we're
We
getting
clap.
it,
Yeah.
we hear the whistles, we hear people saying, "Yeah," and they're like waving or
Yep.
throwing candles up,
Yep.
throwing the lighters up,
Yep.
then you know you're hitting. But if you got people who are so polite that they won't do it,
They just sit there.
it's like you're online. It's like you're like trying to do
Oh,
it like a live cast from your house, and you don't
oh,
know if people are hitting it.
You don't know if they're paying attention, and you don't know if they care. That
What they
was
like.
I will be honest with you, that was the hardest part because I am an in-person. I love to be with a live audience. That's my jam. So, COVID took everything offline. I was touring, I was emceeing tours, and I started doing the in-person, the online stuff. And I'm telling you, it was a struggle at first. It was a struggle. And the more I leaned into it, and then you hear the feedback later,
Mhm.
but it's not that, and
Immediate.
it's that immediate. And when you have somebody who's used to live performance, storytelling, music, poetry, whatever your thing is, it's really difficult. Comedy. I mean, I think about the comedians, and
Yeah,
that they
they can turn
really
it around.
struggle.
Well, they can turn it around quick, 'cause, like, when they
Yeah.
know when something bombs,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
it's kinda like this idea of, like the happy accident, and
Mhm.
like in our business, like in the music, a lot of times we can have all this stuff in the bars all planned out,
Right.
but it's usually a lot of times what we find is this, that there is the unplanned moments that we happen to put the record on that
Yep.
end up be the most magical, best thing we ever thought of. Not that we don't do our practice, but it's usually
Yep.
the something that like somebody hits a chord that's not expected. Instead of
Exactly.
restarting the thing, the other guy
You're right.
responds to it and does something that would go with it,
Mhm.
but it wasn't planned on.
Right.
Unplanned things. And those things, that's what comes from that type of work. And so if you can put yourself into that kind of window where you're like in the moment
Mhm.
and you're not, and you're willing to kind of take what the universe gives you, but it always sounds foo-foo, but but that's what it is.
No,
It's not
it's
that you don't
and
have your experience, but you do. You
yeah.
take it. You
You
take it
take it
as.
and roll with it. As a speaker, one of the things I continually struggle against is recitation because people want to write a speech and stand up and deliver it.
Mhm,
Now,
mhm,
a lot of people read off teleprompters. They do it for a living. They are coached and they are good at it. It looks natural, but it's not. But they
mhm.
also look very natural doing it. The average person cannot read from a teleprompter because they do it like this. They read
Right, you
like
can see what they're
this.
doing.
And it's awful. So I consistently coach my leaders, speakers, fundraisers to learn and know how they're going to open. What is the first words are coming out of your mouth? And you know exactly what you're going to say to close and land that plane. All that stuff in the middle, that's jazz. It may go
Yeah,
this
it's
way,
like
it may
it's
go that
harmonic,
way.
it's fusion. Yeah,
You
it's like fusion jazz. Like, you
it
have a
is.
structure.
You have
Yeah, you can
structure.
yeah, you can kinda riff in the middle of the structure, and it
You
can
have to
change, like,
riff.
your solo can be there, like, how you like, you might have your opening, you might have your ending, you might have your key,
Right.
like, here's
Right.
my hook, and the
Yes.
hook, maybe you might have variations of that hook, but you stay pretty tight
You
on the
stay
hook,
close to it. And
and your
that's
intro
the
might be
key.
kinda pre-planned and your outro,
Yep.
but
You know your intro and your outro, and from a storytelling perspective, you know how to hook them and you know how to land it. And I typically tell people you need to have 3 pillars in the middle. 3 pillars are your story. It's,
mhm,
who one person, what did and I've working with a nonprofit, if what did they overcome because of the work you do? So what were they like before? Maybe that was dirty water, sickness, illness, disease. You come in, now there's clean water. Clean water, they can go to school, they're thriving, everything's doing well. And then we go to the but there are 500 more just like Susan who was struggling with this. And then we
mhm,
land the plane. All that stuff in the middle that I just said, that's the jazz.
yeah,
And the people that are incredible at this learn how to draft a complete story and they practice it. Now, as a musician, you practice all the time, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So, but speakers tend to think they can write a speech
and
and
just
then they
read it,
can walk onto a platform,
just
lay
read it.
down a binder and present it, and it sounds exactly like that,
Oh,
like
well,
they are reading.
that's probably why it falls flat, right? Because, like,
Exactly.
well, I think it's the idea or that vulnerability is the big thing, like in the
Ooh,
creativity.
Yes.
where we always try to tell I tell when I'm producing, as somebody will come in with this, like, demo and it's all there, and
Mhm.
that's fine, and I said, "Well, that's good that you have that, but let's play with it." And then they
Mm.
kinda get what? They get a little nervous because like, "Oh, this is it's like, it's here, like, why can't we do" No, because, like, what I wanna do is I wanna see what you do,
Yeah.
and when you just riff it,
Yeah.
and then I wanna see it. Do you like, you're gonna go on stage, right? You should be able to kinda just play it, right? You should be
Right.
because 'cause you've been probably you're a musician, so I trust that you just go out here and play it and then feel
Yeah.
it, right? So if you go and you start to riff it, then you actually start to really know it. And
Yes.
and that's where, I love my example going back to Dylan. Dylan was famous, in the '70s for taking, like, a song like Tangled Up in Blue, and he had multiple versions of it with different sets of
Yes.
lyrics, and he would run it, and it has, like, the main hook,
Wow.
but he would run it at different shows, and we'd have the different versions. I've got, like, the demos
Wow.
of the different versions that he
That's
actually
so
put
cool.
down from the studio.
That's
Yeah,
so cool.
with variations of the story, and he would
It
actually go and execute, a concert with the non-studio track version,
Oh,
and I thought that
wow.
was so cool that he would do that, and, people today are so not willing to do that, a lot
No.
of musicians today, they don't wanna they're
Check in the
totally
box.
tied to what is in the box, and I'm like, it actually was worth going to these
Oh, yeah.
concerts because he did that.
The I was gonna say those concerts in the late '70s and '80s, they were so killer. It's so different than the concerts of today because it's very canned now. It doesn't
Yeah, they're so in the
feel.
box.
Yeah, it's in the box. Well, fun story talking about walking outside of the box. I was, working a tour. I was emceeing and producing, and I had a person who managed the what we call the appeal portion of the night. That's when they tell the story to get the sponsorships, which is what we're doing the tour for. So, I have my appeals person comes down with COVID. We are
Mhm.
in nowhere. I'm talking about nowhere in Washington, the state. Like, we're in the middle of nowhere. I can't
Boonies.
get we are in the boonies. We are on it's our off day on tour. I can't get anyone to meet us because we're going up to I think we're going to Portland or somewhere in the Pacific Northwest. I don't have anybody on the roster. So I worked for a very large, big nonprofit, and we're looking, and finally I'm talking to my boss and I said, he goes, "You can do it." And I said, "Well, I'm rusty. I don't do this anymore." I had less than 24 hours to create an appeal, to tell the story, and I haven't done it in 4 years, so I was incredibly rusty, but I did what I tell people to do. I literally practiced starting that night. I practiced, I wrote it out, I started saying it. If everybody went to bed, I had to shut up. Um, but I listened to it because I had recorded it, so I listened to it over
Mhm.
and over. Next morning, I get up, I literally walked a parking lot for hours, and I did that 20-minute speech over and over. So when I stepped on the stage that night, it just was natural. Because
Natural, yeah. You
it's like you
rehearsed.
said, I had rehearsed, I had riffed the whole thing because I would do it this way, and then I would do it that way, and I would play with it, and I did it for the next 6 nights on tour. Um, and every time I did it, it was different. And
Yeah,
even my production
that's
guys were
okay.
like, "You
That's what
never do
I
the
think
same thing."
one of the things I think people get freaked out about is, like, if you don't do it the same, like, if you had only one version and you
Yeah.
kept on changing it and then you kept on thinking you were failing because it kept on changing, where if you accept that you're gonna rip it and you have a structure,
Yes.
it's kinda like
Yeah.
fusion jazz,
Yeah,
then
it
you put less
absolutely is.
pressure on yourself, then that you're willing to, like, oh, if you catch yourself, like, being so wanting to be so perfect, it's like the
Mhm.
perfection trap where people
Oh,
kind of become like, a deer in the headlights because they mess up because they have this expectation that they're going to do
yeah.
word for word, note for note, and then they don't
That's
hit
so
the note,
common.
and then they get
Then they
wrecked.
stop. Yeah,
Yeah, they get
that's
the
so
pause.
common.
You can kind of see they messed up. Like, you want to make it so, like, it's like Herbie Hancock and Miles Davis, and Herbie hit the different chord, and you don't even know that that's a mistake because
Right.
you don't even know because they just
They keep
seamlessly go
going.
through it.
Yep.
Right. That's the way
I
you riff it.
exactly. I consistently coach my speakers and leaders that I work with. I'm like, "The only person that knows you made a mistake is you,
Yeah.
because nobody
Yes.
else has got the script. So
Yeah.
just don't stop." And I have some that are really they're tied to those notes and they're not gonna let them go. Um, and it just is who they are. So, if those people I encourage, I say, "Okay, if you have to have them, then do notes this way. Have one word that tells you what your opening is, just one that's gonna bring it to mind, one that takes you to the next turn in the story." So just 1 or 2 words, just
Wow.
so it's like a little roadmap
Yeah, it's a
and
little
you
cheat
can
sheet.
follow it. It's a little cheat sheet, but there aren't spelled out words, because what happens if you walk up there and you have a script, you end up doing this,
You gotta keep
and
on
you're
looking
like,
down. Yeah,
or worse yet is they pick up their iPad
and
and
to
they
bring it
do
up.
this. Oh, makes me crazy, man. I literally wanna smack it out of their hands. And they might lay it down, but then they'll pick it up and they'll do this, and I'm like, "You
Really?
just disconnected with your audience. They don't
Yeah,
wanna
well, if they
hear
see
you
yeah,
anymore."
if they see you doing that, there's like, "What's going on?"
Or they
Yeah,
use their phones.
that's even worse.
That's
See,
because
yeah, it's terrible 'cause I can tell, like, in the vocal booth, I tell ours, like, "Quit bringing the cell phone in with your lyrics to the mic." Right? Make sure you just have those lyrics and
Yep,
trust that you have it. And if
yep,
you go a little off, that's fine because
okay.
guess what? You're probably going to put something down that's better than what's on the phone.
It's and that's why I tell people, record every single time you speak. Record every single when you're rehearsing, just put on your voice memo
Yeah.
and let it go, and then listen to it back.
Yeah. Review it. Yeah.
Listen to what
That's
you're doing. One of the stories, and you may know this because you're more in the music industry than I am, but I remember I and still am, a huge Prince fan. So,
mm,
I mean, Purple Rain
yeah. He's my
is
guy.
just it was masterful. It was masterful. But one of the stories I read, after he had passed away, is that he would watch his entire show after every performance, and they would critique it and go over it, and I just think that's brilliant.
Yeah. He was a perfectionist when it comes to that. Like he was like known for like, like a James Brown level, like finding people, if
Mhm,
but also like as he got more older, he got less more into improvisational kind of jazz, kind of funk
mhm.
fusion, and
Yep,
it kind of went that way. But at the beginning, he was really kind of note for note. He's like really get the guys
really.
into
Mhm.
being a note for note, right? But then he started realizing, like, 'cause he loved Miles Davis, like they knew
Yes.
each other, and he
Oh,
started to understand. I think probably after talking to Miles that that's not actually how you do music. Like how you do music is like the songs evolve if you're willing to like let them go
yeah, oh,
and let
yes.
them be what they are, and they can be what they are in any moment. And if
Mm.
you talk to like people who do Coltrane, Hancock, and
Oh,
Davis and Monk, they're all kind of going, yeah,
wow.
they knew what they were going to do. They had things they composed, but they were willing to open it up. And that's why people love to go to these live performances of these great musicians and go
Yeah,
listen to them because they
yeah.
are unique moments in time that are not just like today. You get people show up in a concert and the song is the same as the song that's on the master.
Word for word. It's a
It's and
word for word.
all
Yeah,
all the backing tracks is all the same. Like I could
same
have
as me.
just listened to it on a CD or on
Yeah,
my phone.
yeah, same thing, and probably been a little cheaper, you know?
Yeah.
Um, I live near Nashville. I live in the Birmingham, Alabama area, but a couple of hours from Nashville, and there's the Bluebird Cafe. And I don't know if you know about the Bluebird, but a lot of the Nashville locals go there, and it is nothing for you to see. And I've got friends that go and play there every once in a while, and you will see, just a local person and some of the most famous people in the country music industry, but they're all just there playing songs together. They're hanging out and having a good
That's a
time.
scene. Yeah, that's what you want. It's kinda like
It's
a
beautiful.
CBGBs or,
Yes, yes.
like like there's certain scenes, like, the CBGB scene, you had the Talking Heads,
Oh,
Ramones,
yes.
you had,
Oh,
all these great and you had it's like how you had the Ramones and the Talking Heads, Debbie Harry and, Blondie,
oh,
like, very
wow.
diverse. like it was like those
But
bands are
what
all
a
different.
cool group. Yes,
They're all
very different.
yeah, and they were all kind of collaborating and kind of feeding off each other. That's why Blondie was so like it's kind of punk, it's kind of new
I
wave,
love
it's
Blondie.
kind of
Yeah.
rap. It's like it's all
Yep.
over the place because
Yep.
they're in this zone
So that
where they're
influence.
inspiring at each other from the different genres. Like
Wow.
cross genre is very important. And some people are so into lanes, but I'm very
Mm.
much into cross genre because it's like you learn something. Like you
You
look at things you're not
exactly.
good at.
Yes. I think that's so key. I think there's something that's happened in the last 10 to 15 years where people literally they find their niche and they just stay right there in it. And they don't because like I said, I'm not a musician, but oh my gosh, I love hanging out with my musician friends. I love going and sitting in when they're just playing. I for a season I worked and this is a really great gig. I was the producer and director of development for a it was a faith-based Christian charter cruise company. So we chartered ships, cruise ships, took all the artists off and put on our own artist. Well, one of my
Wow.
favorite artists is named Bernard Harris, and he plays left-handed bass. He's plays called himself the upside down bass player, and just the coolest guy. And so Bernard plays with everybody. He's backed up all the different a lot of different artists in that genre. And we were on the ship and he goes, can I get a room late night and just kind of just do a little jam session? I said, sure. So we opened up, just it was, it was late. It was after hours. We had one of the little salons, the little bars we had. They opened it up and he brought in a few players and a few more players came by and they were like, I want in. And you had people, and again, this is the Christian music, but you had people that went from the rock style to the ballad style to everything in between singer songwriters,
Yeah, that's what you want.
duos, groups. Oh, let me tell you, Phantom, it was so popular. There were people, because this was one of the medium-sized lounges, probably hold maybe 200 people.
Everybody wanted to go to
And
that one.
everybody was I walked by and I was like, "What in the world is happening?" So I made my way in and I get over to Bernard, he's on stage, and I'm like he goes, "So we moved it the next night up to the deck because they could be outside." So we
Mhm.
moved it everybody wanted to play with everyone. I mean, entire songs came out of that. Like
That's how that's how it happens. That's why I try to
new
tell
s
people that
yes, it was
collaboration
crazy.
is so important, yeah,
It was
for
it was
creativity.
it was so crazy. There was a really young band at the time. They were brand new on the scene, and they were just getting their feet wet. Now they're now one of the biggest in the industry, but they were, like, leaning in and listening to these guys who were the leaders in the industry at that time, and it was so fun to watch, and the next year, when we put it all together, we were like, "Okay, we're gonna give them" we literally gave them slots, like, they
A
were doing,
slot
like, midnight, that we did it, like, 9 o'clock. We're like, "You have 9 to midnight to jam," and they would it
people
was
love that.
the
It's
most fun.
it's kinda like, the Woodstock kinda I don't know,
It
Grateful
was
Dead was kinda known
yes,
for that.
yes,
Funkadelic
yes.
were known for that. There was a time period in music, where bands did that in these big festivals,
Uh,
and they would cross collaborate, and they would just have these massive jam
oh,
sessions, and,
yeah.
the Dead were famous for bringing tons of musicians in, and they would just go for hours in San Francisco. That's kinda what
I
they did.
Listen, I love that. My daughter, who is a young adult, I was recently she lives north of me, and I was recently with her, and we were traveling, and I noticed I said, "Where did you get that sticker?" She had a sticker on her water bottle. It was a Grateful Dead sticker, and she goes, "Oh, they had a Grateful Dead night at the hockey thing or soccer thing." I said, "A
People were
Grateful
into it.
Dead night?" And she goes, "Yeah." And she goes, "Have you ever heard of them?"
Yeah. Well,
But
they
yeah.
were a thing back in the day. They were a thing,
I was
but
like, "Yes."
it's
So
important,
fun.
I think, that the audience got captured by something
Yes,
maybe that was unexpected, and I think
completely unexpected.
a lot of times people will spend so much time trying to give everybody something that everybody's got, like, everybody on the net is running a cat video, right? Because
Yep,
the cat video gets
they
1,000,000
hit.
views,
They hit.
and so but it's like so you do variations on it, say, but the question is, like, is that authentic? Is that really what you wanted to say, or you just
Yeah,
want to jump on the trend? So, like,
yeah,
are you trying to be the trend? Like, if you're running a company, are you trying to be with your competitor? Or are you trying to show what you is your secret sauce?
your
So, are you gonna
uniqueness.
go just
Yeah,
replicate what this other company's doing and put out
right.
the next, like, you know, widget with this? It's the same
Absolutely,
widget. Like, are you actually gonna
absolutely.
do something new?
Doing something fresh. I was meeting with one of my speakers today, and I had a coaching call with her, and she really has this really great message, but she loves this holistic living. So she's telling me this, and I'm like, "Girl, that merge those 2 things together and be," because individually those 2 things are very on trend. But when
Mhm.
she blends the 2,
Becomes
she
something
becomes
different.
this very different, unique voice, this very authentic voice. And she's not trying to pigeonhole into one or the other. And I think what I see as a storyteller and as a speaker coach is people try to get in a lane, like you said, and they won't get out of the lane. So they're
Yeah.
stuck and
They
they
kinda
become this one note, not
well, people
interesting.
think there's a lot of people who say that's what you're supposed to do, right? I had
Oh,
people
yeah.
tell me with this podcast, if you started with singer-songwriters, you stay with singer-songwriters.
Yep. Yep.
And, that wasn't the growth move because
Right.
what was going on is like, musicians were having a hard time certain in 2020
Oh,
and I had to move into other areas. Not that
yeah.
we still don't talk to them, but by expanding my reach well, then people say, well, what's your show about? If you're talking to all these different people within, it's too confusing. It's like, no, there's a thread. I'm
Right.
talking to creative people. All human beings are creative.
Yeah.
So then that means that you have this wide group of people, and you won't run out of people to talk to, right? But if you're in your niche, and I only talk to punk rockers, well,
Yep.
eventually I'm
It's too
gonna run
small.
out of hip
Yeah.
punk rockers.
Yeah, because there's a supply. Well, and the same in my area is that it's, very much staying in the lane of I worked with faith-based speakers, and, people are like, "Well, if you broaden your audience, you're really gonna lose people." I'm like, "I don't think so." And I didn't. I mean, I work with leaders and fundraisers and nonprofits and, C-suite and a little bit of everything. I
Mhm.
still have a really strong voice in the faith-based speakers, but I want to open up and because storytelling is universal. And I love that you say everyone is creative because I spent the first probably better part of my life considering myself not creative because I didn't make music.
Yeah. Well, I think
And
it's like
then
sparks in everybody, and they don't
yeah,
realize, like, what
they
you're
don't
doing.
see it.
Like, what you're when you find a method, a ideology, if you've developed, like,
Yep.
strategy, like your
Yeah.
story telling swashbuckler, right? And you're a strategist,
Yeah,
and you come up like, that's your vision.
that's
That's
creative.
a
Yeah.
creative thing. It's like any
Yep.
author,
Yep.
every person that's a life coach, they have their own perspective. That's just
That's a
like
creative.
any creative exercise. You created like this whole kind of concept. And
Yes.
and if you create concepts and you execute them, no matter what, I mean, athletes do it. They create certain moves,
Yep.
certain techniques, and
Yep.
it's like they're just as creative as any musician. It
I
creates like a riff on a bass. It's like you
oh,
riff
yeah.
on Magic Johnson, like the way he did something, or Larry
Oh,
Bird. Yeah,
listen,
they all had their own thing.
I am not a sports person. I do love college football. That's my only sports thing. But watching athletes on a because football's not it's not poetry in motion. And sometimes they will do
Sometimes
amazing things.
can't be.
Sometimes. But watching basketball,
There's a lot
I
of
mean,
moves.
oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I mean, watching Shaq play and knock that ball out of people's hands and leap, just the leaps that they would do.
Yeah,
It's
it's
poetry in
just
motion.
techniques. Everybody has their own. It's like dancing.
Yes.
Like it's
Yes.
like it gets to
Yes.
a point where there's like this certain like level of body control that
Yes.
gets like poetic. It seems
Oh.
like it has a lot of and I'm always as an artist, I'm always looking for the poetry and everything.
Oh,
And so,
sure.
you could be like, where a song's gonna come from is like, I could be watching a game and watching how
Mhm.
a guy moves, and that can make me trigger something in my head and make me turn it into a music. And it's
Exact
just,
and I could do the same thing and make it turn it into a story.
yeah, that's how
And
it is.
it's just how the creative work and, like, I have a dear friend who is this incredible cook, and she just like and my husband, he will take, like, things and put them together, and I'm like, "Wow, I would have never thought of doing that." But it's this creative brain, and that's the way it manifests in them is through food.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm
Cooks are super creative. Chefs
oh,
are like
it's
they're
incredible.
artists like always get lined into chefs gets the same kind of headspace.
Yeah.
There's a lot of experimentation.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people they're willing to. The best chefs are always kind of pushing. They're crossing things, crossing
Pushing
different
the
types,
envelope.
different
Well
spices, different cooking techniques. They're crossing things over from the one place to the next, and you're like, oh, if you want to stay in the
mm,
lane,
yeah.
you're not going to get that.
Well, and, one of my daughters is a she owns her own hair salon, and she's an incredible colorist. So she colors hair, and she is just an artist in it. I mean, she can make colors and put
Yeah,
together
that's art.
blends that are just incredible. And it truly is an art form. And I like you said, I think everyone has that creative part of them. We all have been created to create.
Yeah.
It's a
I mean, that's
part of
the
who
whole
we
thing.
are.
It's
Yeah.
the whole like, we all can have a canvas, whatever it is, right? We
Yes,
can all
yes.
be very creative with it. Is that some people put, like, limitation like, limiting beliefs
Oh,
versus, like, having a growth mindset,
yeah.
and it's like a hang up. Like, if you had a hang up and somebody was telling you you couldn't do it, and
Mhm.
and then you believed it because it's like that's your
Yep.
truth. It's like, no, that's not a truth. That's just a belief, but you think it's the truth, and, like,
But we tell ourselves, like, I told myself for years I could not paint. Everything you see behind me down the small paintings, those are mine. But I told myself for years I couldn't do it until I just picked up a paintbrush one day, actually with my grandson, and I said, "Let's paint something." And we started playing, and I was like, "I think I like this." And so it became and then COVID.
Well, that's why art therapy is so important. Like, you go into therapy, there's a lot of
It's
people
so
who
good.
they'll get people into it, and they'll say, "Well, I can't draw." It's like, you don't know because,
You didn't
like,
try.
I always tell people, like, sometimes if you wanna get a musician to jump on an instrument they're not comfortable with.
Hmm.
So you get, like, a guy who doesn't play piano, it's like, "I actually want you to write this on the piano." And it's like, "Well, I can't play piano."
Ooh.
Because what happens is, like, how they approach the piano will be very unique. And it might not be up to the level of the best piano
Sure.
player, but
Sure.
it actually could say something in a different way, and it can be like the secret sauce because you put them on a different instrument, they start
I love that.
approaching it. And it's
Yes.
that's just like where you push yourself into areas that the comfort zone is not great
It's not
because
good.
it'll
Yep.
it'll cause you to, like, evolve in terms of your
Yep.
capabilities. You'll
Yep.
and being a public speaker, a lot of times the people are like, "Oh, they're so scared of it." They're so
One of the
stiff
biggest fears,
at
speaking in
it,
public.
right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you get somebody that's very stiff, not very natural, to
Yeah.
kind of start to find their zone?
One of my favorite tips, this is a couple of funny tips. So number 1, eat potato chips before you speak. The oil will help. They're salty and they just taste good, then they make you happy. Um, Number 2, and this is one, this will help you not be nervous. So you're standing stage right, you're getting ready to go out. I want you to clench your rear end. Just clench it. Everything you've got. Because what happens is you can't be nervous and do that at the same time. And
That's
then I
awesome.
want you to do this. I want you to reframe nervousness because anxiety and excitement sit side by side. They are almost the same emotion and they work out that way out in our bodies. So if you reframe that into excitement, it will help. Deep breathing and centering yourself before you step on stage. One of the most difficult things to teach people is how not to walk on the stage talking. Because when you
Oh,
particularly if you walk on a large stage,
yeah.
because everyone's staring at you, well, that's okay. Let them stare. Walk on, stand on in the middle of the room, plant your feet, take a deep breath in, pause, and then launch right into that captivating hook, that intriguing question. If you don't have a captivating hook, ask a really startling question around your topic. Announce a statistic that's going to make everyone gasp. But then you
Mhm.
have to do this. You have to pause. And there's a reason for it. Number one is they have to absorb that.
Oh, that's good. That's key. That's
And
smart.
if you don't let them absorb it, you're going to move on to the next thing. I tell a story about having a brain aneurysm because I had a brain aneurysm. And if I don't pause after I tell people that I was diagnosed, that I got a phone call that said I have a brain aneurysm, beat, 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 then I say something funny. And the reason I say something funny after that is because right then their energy just went, oh my gosh. And they're
Mhm.
terrified for me. And then I remind them that I did not die. And then
You're
they
okay, so
laugh.
give 'em a
Yeah.
laugh, yeah.
And then they laugh. And then I tell them, I didn't even know how to spell aneurysm, but I will spell it for you now. And it just lightens the mood. What I'm doing there is I'm taking them on an emotional journey. The pause, actually, in our brains, when there is silence in our brains, we think and process deeper.
Yeah,
So
that's
if you
important.
are someone, if you're trying to raise money and you want people to join your cause, and you just say, over 10,000 children died last year due to lack of clean drinking water. I don't know if that's a right statistic. Don't quote me.
Mm.
But after I say that, I'm going to pause. Or every night in this country, you know, 8,000 children go to bed hungry. There's probably way more than that. Every week in this country, 8,000 children go into foster care. I have to pause right there because I want you to think and process
That's
real
process,
deep. And
but
then I'm going to take you through the story. But I want you to process and I want you to engage with me emotionally and match emotions. Like, and I tell my speakers that have really hard stories, like maybe they have a story of something horrible that happened to them. I said, if you don't take people out of that and let them breathe, they're going to walk away just depressed and overwhelmed. And you don't want that. You don't, most people don't want people to walk away just feeling downtrodden after they've heard them
no, no,
speak.
that's not the way.
Not,
You wanna
it's not
be
the goal, not the goal.
yeah, it's very important because a lot of times, like, in music, like, a lot of people wanna fill the space,
Yeah.
and what we've learned is, like, the silence between the notes
Ooh,
is really key and
yes,
actually having breaks, but we live in an age where so many people are trying to fill up the sound and then hit
yes.
people in that first 3, 7 seconds, whatever.
Yeah.
And what happens is like then they don't have traditional song structure. They
Right.
don't have intros, they don't have crescendos, decrescendos, they don't have any variety.
Right.
They'll have just nothing but the hook. The whole
It's
song
just
is the hook. And
over
then it
and
has no
over.
variation and it doesn't give time for people to actually process.
Mhm.
Even in the lyric in the vocal, if you say something really profound, but you keep on just layering vocals, you don't give people time to
I'm gonna
actually
miss it. Yeah.
hear it. Like, it's just really important. So, like, what you're saying makes sense to me as a musician is because, like, you do need to, like, have people actually hear what you're saying, and it is
Yeah.
we sometimes we just overlayer and
Mm.
overtrack, and then there's so much stuff going on that people don't really even get what we were
Get what you're
playing
saying.
at all.
I wanna ask you a question because I love music and we both love '70s music. So, if you were to pick one of your favorite storytelling songs from the '70s, what would you pick? I know what mine
Oh,
is.
I really like Tangled Up in Blue,
Okay,
Blue
Tangled Up in
from
Blue.
Dylan. This
Okay.
the story and it's supposed to be about him and his wife,
Mhm.
but it's very far removed. He creates all these characters to kind of
Yeah.
remove him. But everybody said, "Well, this is about him and his wife's relationship." But you're like, "Really? Like, really look at the lyrics." It's like he's telling this story, and it's like he was really working in this camp at logging camp. He's
Mhm.
creating this character. It's going to this bar. It's like, is that him? Is that really him? And it just you like get drawn into this visual. Like I see like a film when I
Mhm.
hear that song. I get my
Could
own
see it.
interpretation
Right.
of all these scenes he's given us. He's a
Mm.
cook in the great north woods. I'm like, wow. It's like he's at this bar and he's doing, somebody's
Right.
trying to tie his shoes. It's like all these scenes, he's just really being I just
walking
love
us
that.
through it.
Yeah, I just love the
Interesting.
cinematic quality of it.
Um, there's a song, and I'm completely mess this up because I was not prepared to talk about it. But for years, I thought it meant one thing, but I learned it meant something else. It was a song called "Give Me Back My Bullet,"
Oh, wow.
and the bullet was not a bullet in a gun. It was the bullet on the chart. It was "Give Me
Oh,
Back My Bullet." They wanted their bullet back because they wanted to raise up the chart. I don't remember the song, I just remember that part of it, but one of my
it's
favorite storytellings. I love the Eagles, I think they're
oh,
incredible.
yeah, they're phenomenal.
I mean, I love Hotel California just because I think that story is so dark and twisted,
Yeah.
but at the same time and then also Life in the Fast Lane, which is another really dark so that might say a little bit about me, Phantom, I don't know. Um,
But those are
but
great, great
those are
songs.
great. But let me ask you, there's a song, the song "Someone Left the Cake Out in the Rain." I
Oh,
don't I don't know what that song I've never known what that I've never researched it, but I've never understood that song.
yeah,
Like,
it's kind of a weird image.
it's weird the imagery is crazy, and I'm thinking, "What are they trying to say?" Every time it
I don't know if
doesn't
they're
play much
trying to
anymore.
be, like, unique. I think they're trying to say something that had been said. So
Okay,
they
okay.
created this they said, like, they created this image that there's like, "Well, who leaves the cake out in the rain?"
The Rain, yeah, that took
It
so long
was
to
like
make it. Yeah, the whole song is to me is just funny and different and unique, and I'm like, "And what were you saying? What was the point?" And then
I
I
guess
I
all the
love
effort to bake the cake just gets washed away
yeah,
because the cake
that's
is
true.
kinda temporary, right?
It
It's not very solid, and if you put it
yep,
in rain, it's gonna even just dissolve.
yeah,
So, from my perspective, it was like, here's something that's not very lasting, and then
mm.
you put it in the rain, and it just gets evaporated.
Oh,
So, I think
it's a good
they're
point.
trying to say
That's
it
a good
like that,
point.
but then being a
Yeah,
songwriter, that's how I
that's how
interpret
you
it.
see it? Well, and also I loved, Karen Carpenter. I think she was an
Oh, she's brilliant.
incredible
She
gone
had a
way
lot
too
of
early.
layers. What I liked
Oh,
about her, she had this melancholy voice that was one of
yes.
the best voices I ever
Oh,
heard, and
yeah,
even when she's
absolutely.
singing a song that's a happy song,
Yes.
her melancholy voice still
So
imprints this
good.
melancholy onto the song that's supposed to be
Yep,
happy,
yeah.
and so the
Oh,
depth of her melancholy voice or the quality of her voice was so
and this
powerful in telling the
so good.
story.
Her
You don't get
stories
a
were
lot.
so powerful.
Yeah, you just don't get, like, a
Mm-mm,
pop singer that
mm-mm.
evoke has that much power
That ha
to
yes.
do that. Today, I don't really
So,
hear anybody at the
no,
level of Karen Carpenter.
no, and Joan Baez, and I
Yeah,
mean,
Joni Mitchell's great, but even
sh
Karen's, like, has something that
oh,
Joni doesn't have.
oh,
Jo
absolutely. It's
Joni's telling these stories amazing,
they're
but
incredible, but the
Karen
delivery
just has this delivery that's like, "Oh, it's impeccable."
it's never been I don't think it's I and I it's never been replicated by anyone I've ever known. I love
I never
Jewel
heard
when she hit the scene, I loved her. I thought she was unique, she had a great voice, she was different. I really like Adele, I think she's got a great voice, but it's still nothing compared to what Karen
No,
Carpenter had.
Karen, Karen's just like I people always look at me as like, "How can you?" Well, I'm a child of the '70s. I grew up with my mom playing
Oh,
those songs
oh,
on
yeah,
8-track
absolutely.
and playing them
Yeah,
on
albums and vinyl
vinyl.
and yeah, and 8
My
track,
mom
yeah,
was, like, wearing
absolutely.
out those albums. She's like,
Those were
my mom didn't like music that much. I mean, she listened to Johnny Cash. She loved Johnny Cash,
oh,
but she's
I
from West
loved I
Virginia.
love Johnny Cash. He's another great
From
songwriter.
West Virginia, but we'd hear, like, Cash, and then we hear the Carpenters, and then my brother's
Mhm.
playing like the Beatles and Hendrix and Zepp, and my dad's playing like James Brown. So I'm hearing all this stuff.
All
It's
of the
probably why
stuff,
I like music, but
all the stuff.
I had an appreciation for Karen because like I heard it, and I'm like, yeah, I hear my brother playing Zepp, but I still like Karen. It's like
It's
my brother is like, oh, how can you like that? That's boring. It's not boring to me.
it's
There's
not
something
boring.
about it
Yeah.
that like
There
deeper
was
than what
something
Zepp's doing.
yeah, it was something in the like you said, her delivery, her voice, the way they wrote those songs, they
Yeah.
were just and I think she did the bulk of the writing, didn't she?
Yeah, well, she worked with, like, a lot of songwriters like Neil Diamond and stuff,
Mhm,
but
mhm.
it really was, like, her brother would, like, rearrange
Yeah, he
things
arranged
that they would
everything for them, didn't
like,
they?
they would get things and then he'd, like, rearrange the piano parts and all the parts,
Wow.
and then she
Wow.
would interpret the vocals, like, the Neil Diamond version of the song doesn't sound like her song. So
No,
she ends up
no.
owning the song because she took it and then kind of reinterprets it with the way
Wow,
her delivery is. So to me, she
wow.
writes the song again because of what she did, and this is how you own it as a creative
Yeah,
person, like, you own it
you
because
own it.
that's who you are. When
Well,
you
and I have to say, I've gotta give homage to one of my favorite songwriters. I know we're right at the end, but Dolly Parton is
oh,
to
she's
me,
great. Oh, she's a
and
fan.
talking about a treasure, a national treasure. We just need to pack her in cotton and
Well,
keep
she
her
needs to
around.
win all the awards because she's, like, been there and she's still here,
And
and,
she released like a rock
yeah, rock
song,
album.
a rock album.
She's still doing it.
She's still doing it. I mean,
She's
and
pushing
it
it.
she's incredible, and I don't know how old she is, but she way on up there.
Well, she's done
And sh
it, and she's still there, so she lived a life. She lived a good life,
yes,
and she's done it. But
she is a great storyteller.
people go to MarySchneider.com, is that how they get in touch with
Mary
you?
R. The R.
Oh,
Don't
like
forget the
R
R.
Snyder. Oh,
MaryRSnyder.com. Yeah,
MaryRSnyder.com.
there's an R in there, and the only reason there's an R found 'em is because there are a ton of Mary Snyders in this world. It's
Oh,
nothing fancy.
differentiate.
I say it stands for rebel or wreck. You can use either one. But, yeah, MaryRSnyder.com. They can find out all about me. My new podcast is launching in, 4 days.
Oh, cool.
And so, I'll make sure we tag all the stuff under there, under this and get it out there. But I have loved being here so much. I'll be honest with you, I didn't know how it was gonna go, but oh my gosh, we just like jobbed on the
Terrific.
storytelling. Yeah, and the
Terrific.
music. I love that. It was so fun. Thank you so much for having me.
But thank you for being on the show, and again, everybody go to MaryRSnyder.com. That'll be fully clickable on the podcast description. We were
Oh,
just on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. So those descriptions, if you
yep,
click on that, by tomorrow will be on all the major podcast platforms where you can
wonderful.
listen to or watch a podcast. I want to thank you again for being a guest on the Family Electric Ghost podcast, and have a great night.
Thank you. You do the same. Bye now.
Bye.